Welcome to Future Talks. Today I'm with a very good friend of 16, 17 years now. It's been a long time, Mariano Kostelec, co-founder of StudentFinance.com, which is basically a startup slash scale-up which helps students around the world finance their education. You've raised more than 8 million in funding to date. But before we start telling more about Student Finance and how is it going and how it was founded while you're here in Cyprus, I want us to go back in the beginning and cover your whole journey, because you've been an executive in very, very fast-growing high-tech companies. You've launched other very successful startups in Europe and then came to Cyprus to launch your new startup, which is global, but you're based here. So welcome.
Thank you.
Good to be here. So Mariano, let's go way back. Let's start from our London days. We were at university together. You were heading the computer society, I was heading the business club, and at some point we met up to discuss how to merge the two for some reason, and then you joined us to call it the business club. And after that, I remember you going to Goldman Sachs and then joining Groupon, but I'm gonna let you tell us about your journey, how it all started from back in the uni and how it unfolded.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Mike, and great to be here as well. It's been, like you said, more than 15 years, I guess, since we met at King's College. For me, it was interesting at that time. I was always looking for things to do outside of the normal, you see, go to university, do your studies. So I was involved, obviously, in a few of these societies. I'm actually quite proud that the business club still runs today.
It runs today, and they're doing quite a lot, actually.
After so much time, and obviously after those M&A discussions between joining two university societies. But yeah, I was at University of King's in London. Same as a lot of people in London, you eventually go to investment banking. It was the area that a lot of people were going. I got an opportunity to join Goldman Sachs. So I was there for 1 year, which was incredible in terms of seeing how a mature, established business operates. But it was also not what I was seeing myself moving forward, right? So the year after, I was very much looking at what's happening in the world. I got a friend that said that Groupon, which at the time was the fastest growing company in the world.
In the history
of humanity, kind of, just raised or was closing $1 billion in funding, and they were looking for some more people to help with the expansion. So I had an interview with them. They said it was 9 hours ahead of London, a phone call interview. I didn't know where they were in the world, literally. And I remember that interview, and the guy told me, I'm in Tokyo, in Japan. We did a 20-minute interview, and at the end of that, he said, look, today's Tuesday, can you come on Saturday? But also before you come, get a visa for China, because after Japan, we will launch in China. Obviously, I was, 22, 23 at the time. For me, this was an incredible, adventure, maybe to say so. But I did that. I managed to get a Chinese visa. I went to Japan, which I'd never been before, obviously, on that Saturday. And Monday, I started, obviously, there. The first day, let's say, on the job, my manager, which was this German woman, she was 25, 26 at the time. I was 22, 23. She said, look, you have these 3 departments. Pick one, and you need to operate it. This was on my day 1 on the job. Very different from Goldman Sachs, where you have a month-long onboarding, training, to really settle. This was literally go to the deep end, make things happen immediately in Japan, which you just arrived, you've never been here before, you don't speak Japanese, no excuse, no problem, you have to do it. Which was obviously very interesting. Obviously then we went to China, we launched Groupon there. Crazy experience. Obviously I was part of that early team. We were 30 people opening 3 hubs in China.
So you were one of the first 30 in China, open Groupon.
Exactly. I joined the Beijing hub. There was Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, which are 3 largest, let's say, areas in China. And the task that we had was, from those hubs, establish the business and launch to another 20 cities from each of those hubs within 6 months, right? Incredible, task to do, let's say, or goal to achieve. But at the speed and scale at which things operate in China, this was possible. We launched over 50 cities in 6 months, hired over 2,000 people, which in Europe, this is unheard of, I guess.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine this in Europe, but in China, these things happen. We were not even a large player. We did not even make it to the top 10, I would say. We had a list of 5,000 direct competitors operating in the space in China. So it was a very aggressive experience. But for me personally, coming from the Goldman Sachs structured corporate mindset to, I would say, the extreme opposite was, I would say, an eye-opener. More than anything, to see that things are possible. Like you can.
How did you adjust? How did you cope with such change so fast in a country where you've been for the first time? You didn't speak the language. You had 5,000 competitors, and you were in a team of 30 that grew to 2,000 in 6 months. How do you cope with all of that?
Yeah, it's, I don't know. We were working from 8 a.m. till midnight every day. I think this definitely helped. But yeah, it was just a speed. You had to take aggressive tactics of growth, which at the end of the day, not all of that is sustainable. So you see that that level of growth and speed was interesting, worked at the time to scale the business, but eventually was not sustainable.
Yeah.
Obviously, with my future businesses, I'm not applying those same strategies. It's impossible, and it
because Groupon got hit hard as well.
Yeah. The plan was at the time to grow the numbers for the IPO, which did happen maybe shortly after. It was obviously a game to scale quickly, not just in Asia. There was also some other teams expanding the company elsewhere. But yeah, it was a land grab, which you could call at the time. And yeah, it was a playbook that was replicating what works as fast as you can. But yeah, interesting experience. And yeah, I was in China a bit over a year, which was personally for myself also a very interesting experience. But then at some point I started to say, hey, I want to go back to Europe. And I was interested in other opportunities, building other startups companies, which I eventually then started.
Yeah, and have more balance as well.
Exactly.
So then you flew to Europe and you met with two people that were part of the wider consortium of business societies we're involved with. So there was an association called NACU. It was the National Association Consortium of University Entrepreneurs, something like that. And all of the business and entrepreneur societies in the UK, the university societies were part of it. And Ben was leading the Nottingham Entrepreneurs, and Miguel was also in Nottingham Entrepreneurs. So you guys met at NACU?
So we met, actually I met Ben through NACU, so this university business networks. He introduced me to Miguel, who happened to be doing a master's and spent a semester in China. So we actually met with Miguel when I was in China.
In Groupon.
When I was in Groupon, he did a master's in China, so we met there. And from then on, we were the three of us discussing potentially doing something together. We all had a similar mindset and similar ideas. Miguel was finishing this master's very soon. So eventually we decided to get together and start a business, right? We had a few ideas at the time. It was not really final, let's say. And I think this is for me a learning as well, is that you rarely have this moment that you have this magic idea that is going to take over the world. Usually it's a process that evolves. And I think what's important is to start somewhere. So we went to Portugal at the time, partially because Miguel is Portuguese, and it made sense for us to find a place that we could settle, at least to start the business, right? And that's when we started Uniplaces, which was my, let's say, first startup, which is very different from Groupon. It's a marketplace for housing. It's very focused on the mid to long-term accommodation. A lot of students, a lot of young professionals who need a place to stay from anywhere from 1 month to 1 year. If you go for a semester to study somewhere or for a work project and you need a room or an apartment, that was the genesis, the idea of Uniplaces, and we built a platform then to support that.
And now we can safely say that Lisbon is more or less the startup capital of Europe. I mean, the Web Summit is happening there. It moved there from Ireland. A lot of good things are happening there. But you were actually the first startup that went there, got established, got funding. I think you got 30 million in funding, and the investors included, was it Index? Atomico, some of the greatest VCs we have in Europe. So how was it like, launching something like that in Lisbon when there was nothing, and how did it, how was it afterwards?
it's easy to look back, obviously, but this was in 2012. Lisbon was not as, let's say, developed and as an exciting hub as it is today. There were very few startups. We were the first startup to incubate in the first startup incubator in Lisbon, which was Startup Lisboa. And yeah, this was very, let's say, humble beginnings, even though then we went on to raise several rounds of capital. At the time, obviously, we had a bit of small savings that we would use, but we had to get the first funding. Yeah. The first funding was very, very tough to get. We found at the time, when we were just in Portugal, where we can get some financing, we saw this program from Chile, which has nothing to do with Portugal again.
Startup Chile.
Startup Chile. And we applied, and Startup Chile was offering $40,000 without asking for equity. The only condition was that at least one person of the startup, of the founders, needs to be in Chile for 6 months to, start or build a business. So we applied, we got accepted, and obviously between myself and my co-founders, I was born in Argentina. Yeah. So who was the person to go to Chile was myself. I went there, stayed there 8 months in the end. But while I was there, then we managed to raise the first round of funding from some investors, some Portuguese investors, some UK investors, but that was 200K. Yeah. At the time, that was huge. Obviously, it was mission critical. It was really important, to start the business, to really get it somewhere. We were obviously then fortunate to get several rounds of capital more. A year later, we raised just around $1 million, then 3, and then about 20 million or so a couple of years after from Atomico and a number of other investors there. But yeah, obviously looking back, it looks like it was so fast, but when you're in there, things day to day, there's challenges, struggles, problems day to day to overcome. Building a marketplace, which is what Uniplaces is also, I would say, capital intensive, because you need to build the supply and the demand side at the same time and keep them in balance continuously. If one is too high, one is too low, it doesn't work. So obviously you need to do it. But yeah, now looking back, Lisbon since then became a much more exciting city. More startups started to emerge. The government has been proactively supporting entrepreneurship, investment. There's a lot of schemes available at the moment to attract foreign talent, to attract investors. Obviously, big events like the Web Summit relocated to Lisbon, which I would say put Lisbon on the map. But this was definitely not in 2012 when we started there. Yeah.
So things start to change in Lisbon. Uniplaces grows real fast. I recall back then reading a post from your head of growth saying that in 1 year we grew by 1,000% in 1 year. It was insane. I've been watching the growth, and then suddenly COVID hits, where everything has to become remote. You live in Madrid at the time, and that's the time I get a text, "Hey man, how are you doing? I'm moving to Cyprus." And particularly in Paphos, which is my hometown. So how did that come about? How did you decide to come to Cyprus?
Yeah, first a few things. Obviously at the time, just before COVID, I was transitioning away from the day-to-day management of Uniplaces to more non-executive role. Yeah. We have a CEO, but he's still today running the business. Yeah. I was starting my next startup at the time. And obviously with COVID, and even before, everything was remote. Yeah. I was spending a bit of time in Portugal, a bit in Spain, a bit in the UK. But with COVID, obviously, we decided fully to maintain remote activities on one side. On the second, actually, I got, let's say, into the lockdowns when I was in Madrid, which was very strict. It was about 4 months, you could not leave your apartment. And that's when we decided to go somewhere else. And it happened that we saw a few options. One was actually to go back to Portugal. The other one was somewhere else. And that's when I came to Cyprus. Yeah. And I hadn't been here before, but I've obviously lived before in many countries. So moving to a new country, it was not such a big, let's say, change that maybe for some people that might seem. Yeah. Moving from Spain, from Portugal to Cyprus is a lot less different than going from London to Tokyo, let's say, right? So it was just, I'll just go somewhere and see how things are. And Cyprus was a great place. And to be honest, we moved here, set the base, and since then I've been based out of Cyprus. Yeah. Obviously, as a team, we are operating remotely. We have part of our team in the UK, in Portugal, in Spain, in some other countries. We do organize and meet on a, let's say, quarterly or more often basis in person. And I think that is important. But I think what COVID made a lot of people to realize is that you don't need to be around the same desk to do your day-to-day work, especially when you just need to focus on your things. Yeah. It's actually better maybe to be remotely because it gives you more space for that. And Cyprus actually has been a great place. And I think looking back, it's obviously a small island, but it offers so many good things. And I would say such a good balance of everything, right?
Yeah.
There is bigger cities, obviously London or anything else that has much more, opportunities, but you have also all the problems of cities like London or different places. And Cyprus actually has, I would say, a very interesting combination of good business environment, good talent, good lifestyle, good taxation system, relatively good connections. Maybe that's the only downside there.
Connection flights?
Flight connections, yeah.
Okay, let's be honest. Everything else you said, I agree with. Connection flights are horrible here, unfortunately. We don't have connection flights to anywhere except Athens and some other few destinations.
To the UK.
And we need to fix that. Since we're becoming a tech hub in the region, we do need to work on that.
Yeah. I think Cyprus, to attract even more talent, that's probably the only thing that needs to do. It has everything: the weather, the lifestyle, the taxation, the business environment. I think connections are probably the one thing. It's not that there are no ways to travel, but it's obviously harder.
Yeah.
There is no direct to Southern Europe, let's say Spain, Portugal, there's no direct flights. It's not in Schengen, like we were just discussing previously, which makes these transfers through the airports a lot more complex, I would say.
We were discussing about the transfer you had at the Athens airport when you had to come out and go through security again because we're not in Schengen yet.
Usually when you travel from one European Union country to another via with the connecting flight, you just get out of the plane on the terminal and then you board the next plane. But from Cyprus, you need to get out of the airport in your in that connecting airport, usually being Athens, and then go back into the whole check-in security process again, and then go to the terminal, which obviously takes a lot more time and it's less good.
This is another message we should give out to our government and Europe, that our government, primarily not Europe, that we need to be in Schengen. We're in Europe for 20 years. After all, we had to be in Schengen already, so we're hoping to expedite that.
And I think if you look at personally, on a personal, I lived in Portugal for several years, and now I've been living in Cyprus for several years. Both places have a lot of things in common. People speak good English in both places. So obviously almost everyone speaks English in Cyprus. In Portugal, especially in Lisbon, English is very, very common. Let's say the weather, the lifestyle, the quality of life is good in both locations. There is good, let's say, relatively good tax-friendly environment or incentives in both locations to attract talent. So I think Cyprus could really become the next tech hub, because we've seen, especially even Brexit contributed to things, and COVID with the remote work and activities. I know so many investors, entrepreneurs that moved from the UK, from Germany, from Nordics to Lisbon or to Portugal, right? A lot of them moved to Cyprus as well, but it's also a smaller island, less known yet as Portugal is, but has all the potential. And I've been personally very impressed with also some of the big events that have been emerging here, like Reflect Festival and others that have been attracting also thousands of people now to the island here.
It's picking up, it's happening. So that's very encouraging to hear, especially from an entrepreneur, successful entrepreneur like yourself. Now, StudentFinance has been founded, as you said, remotely while you were located here in Cyprus. Enjoying the weather, adopted a cat. You called her Aphrodite. And you've been building this international startup, StudentFinance.com. So how is that going? What are the next steps?
StudentFinance, as the name kind of implies, started as a business to finance training and education, but specifically supporting people that want to transition to technology careers, technology, data, cybersecurity, etc. We built a platform to, let's say, fund or finance their training with the model that they would pay over time when they secure employment. So it was for people to transition to the job market. We started in Spain, in the UK, in some other European countries. We built the platform with support also from the European Union. We have a facility that enables this type of financing to exist. We work with a lot of the tech training programs there. Now, we started to scale the business significantly. We raised obviously some capital. It was definitely very challenging to secure both the equity as well as the debt, because to finance the activity, we need debt, which is obviously different from equity, but then the debt investors want you to have equity, the equity wants you to have debt, and there's always these chicken and egg situations. But we managed to put a structured together. Now, what actually I think is very interesting, and maybe it's also show how you should be adapting as a company, right?
Yeah.
So 2022, interest rates started to go up, which obviously put a lot of the fintech businesses in a more tough position, right?
Yeah.
Access to capital dries out, it's much harder to fundraise, but also because of the interest rates increasing, a lot of tech companies starting to lay off people.
Yeah.
You've seen everything from Google to Facebook, Amazon, etc., laying off tens of thousands of people, right?
Yeah.
So I don't have the exact numbers, but we've seen that almost 1 million people got laid off from these tech companies within a year or so.
Yeah.
So obviously, this puts a lot of pressure into younger people that want to transition to these tech careers, right? While it's still not impossible, it takes longer, it's slower, because companies that are still hiring are hiring the more experienced people that might be laid off, right? So with that, we were thinking a lot about, we build a platform that enables, let's say, the 5% of people that are transitioning to a new career to do it. What about the other 95% of people who are already in a career, but they need to continuously train, even to keep up or to progress? Look at in the last maybe year or 18 months or so, we've seen with the rise of AI, this is disrupting everything. So everyone in every job, in every role needs to be trained into how to use these new technologies that are emerging that will disrupt everything. So if you look at that 95% of the population who is working needs to continuously get trained and upskilled. So what we are doing now with StudentFinance is building a platform to enable these 95% of people to get trained, to upskill, using AI first, and that's where we are building solutions to enable someone to really understand how they can progress in their career, what is missing, what they need. We create personalized, individual, let's call it career or learning path for them, as well as give them very personalized recommendations of specific training and courses they need to take.
Yep.
Now, with our background in financing, obviously we've integrated all of the financing and payment options into this model. Which means that if we recommend you training that costs, let's say, whatever, 2,000 euro, you can pay it up front. You can ask your employer to pay part of it. Imagine your employer pays 1,000 and you pay the other. It's very easy to split that into 2 transactions. If there is tax benefits available, in some countries there are, you could benefit from those tax incentives. And on top of that, back to our financing background, you can pay in installments. So it makes it super easy, frictionless for anyone now to upskill and train. And what we believe as a company is that, people, today still not everyone wakes up in the morning and says, hey, I need to upskill and learn new AI technologies. But people need to do that. Instead of waking up and watch TikTok or Netflix, you should be thinking about, hey, I need to get those skills and acquire new knowledge, because that's what's needed now. I think especially AI is disrupting everything. If you look in the next, I would say 2 to 3 years, people talk a lot, is AI going to take people's jobs? And yes, it will, unless you are prepared for it. And I think that's the message I personally have. And I think what we are building now is a solution to that, so that everyone can be the best version of themselves, everyone can push themselves forward with the model that, we really know exactly what is the best solution for you personally, right? And I think this is also what is possible with AI, to do things on a very individual, personalized level, which before it was potentially impossible to say, will enable thousands and thousands of people, give them very individual plans, individual strategies, individual recommendations. And now this is possible, right? And this is what we're now launching as a next layer or next phase of StudentFinance with a new brand we're going to release soon as well. But it's to really tackle this much broader upskilling of the population at large.
Which is very, very important, much needed, and it cannot be ignored anymore. I mean, not just the digital transformation, specific parts, as you mentioned, the way AI is being infused into our daily lives, and there have been numerous reports on that. So you're practically transitioning or enhancing your position from fintech to edtech as well, and that's very interesting. And it's most interesting that part of this is happening in Cyprus.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is we are at the, I would say, intersection of a fintech operation or fintech business, edtech, because we provide the training, but very connected to the job market, right? It's these 3 elements that we connect in a very seamless way, and I think that is also the very unique thing. People sometimes think, okay, but if I want to do an IT certification or a master's degree or a course, I could find it, but I need to do a lot of research. I don't know really where to look, which options are there. That already is a problem. Second, if I cannot afford it, maybe I can try to get a loan, maybe I can try to finance, maybe I can, there's no way to do that in 2 clicks, and that's what we enable now. Okay, this is the course that's relevant for you. We've done the research, we've done the quality check, we've got everything. This is the one you should take, and you can easily pay in interest-free installments, and on top of that, you can get any tax benefit or share the payment with the employer, right?
Yeah.
So it is really easy, and that's also what is, I think, what was missing in the market to make this part a lot easier than it was for people. And I think we believe with this will unlock huge amount of opportunity for people, for companies, for everyone. I think, we're very excited about this next phase.
Absolutely. My last question to you would be, would you consider moving part of your operations or establishing part of your operations in Cyprus?
Yeah, look, from a business perspective, I do see obviously that, as I mentioned before, Cyprus is definitely a great place. I would personally build teams here. As I said, also, now we're operating remotely, which doesn't mean that we're setting a physical hub. If we were to set a physical hub, I think Cyprus has, from what I've seen so far, good talent. It's concentrated still in, obviously, a few locations in some of the cities here. There's a lot of engineering, fintech talent here as well. So from that perspective, that could definitely be a good base. But also, ignore that to, relocate executives or people that, want also a good place to be based. So yeah, I think that would be definitely an option. We are not yet doing so, but I would definitely consider that if we were to build something more.
Awesome. Great seeing you again today. As always, it's great to catch up with you. And based on the last part of our discussion on student finance, it would be always great to have a follow-up episode to see how it develops and how things progress here in Cyprus. So hopefully by the next time we meet, we will have connection flights and foremost be in Schengen. Thank you for your time today, Mariano.
No, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for watching. We will see you at the next Future Talks episode. Take care.